Hi again, welcome back. Today we're going to discuss if conditions. In the if conditions, there are certain things that we need to learn, but before that, let's review what we have learned so far. So, we learned how to declare an integer number. Here we're declaring an integer called number, and then we print a cout syntax saying that we use cout syntax to print enter an integer. Then we learned how to store this entered integer by the user using cin syntax or cin function. So far, we learned how to do this. But now we're going to discuss the if conditions. So if conditions are like this. So imagine the user enters one number. And here we're saying that if the number is greater than 0, then print the number is positive. Else if, where we are having another condition. Else if, when we add another condition, we use else if. So else if, in the bracket, number is lower than 0, so smaller than 0, in parentheses, cout the number is negative. And another else that we have is that if the number is neither than but greater than 0 nor smaller than 0, we have the else, the final else that says that, okay, the number is 0. So generally it's like if the number is greater than 0, it prints it's positive. If the number is lower than 0, it prints negative. And if neither of the conditions are met, it prints whatever that we want. We can say the number is 0, or we can say neither of the conditions met. So whatever else, it says that the above mentioned condition did not meet. So this is the else if. So let's run and try with a few more examples to see what happens. So no error, it's compiling now. Okay, enter an integer. I would say 10. So it prints the number is positive because 10 is greater than 0. Let's try it once more. So I would say minus 12. So the number is negative, so it works correctly. So if I mention something like 0, like here, it says neither of the conditions are met. So here the simple version of the if conditions. What we need to be careful about is how these if. So what is important is to know how these if conditions are written. So how basically they are written is that we have the if, then parentheses within which we write the condition. Like here I say that if the number is greater or equal 90, then I put the brackets to have the conditions. One bracket is here and another one is here. If I'm going to check another if condition, this time we say else if. Then within the parentheses, we mention number is lower than 90, for example. And then we have the brackets. And then we cout the result. So in this situation, it is not efficient to have else. Why? The reason is that then a number is either greater or equal to 90 or lower than 90. So there is nothing that these two wide conditions cannot meet. So this is why the else condition is not considered in this example. So if we want to run this code, it would be something like this. So we get the input from the user and we compile. Okay. Now that it is compiling, okay, it asks to enter one integer. I would say 94. So the result is your score is A. Let's run again. If I run again, this time I would type 75 and it says your score is not A. So if we test this code multiple times, either of these two statements will be printed. Like if I say 115, your score is A. So there is no condition that checks if the number is at the same time larger and smaller than certain value, so it pushes the number within a range. And also because, as I mentioned earlier, these two conditions are vastly considering everything that integer number can has there, so no else condition is required for this example. In other videos, in the continuing of this section, we are going to discuss some more coding exercises that help you to understand these concepts easily and grasp the meaning behind it. So you can you can put your hands on the keyboard and start coding to, little by little, by trial and error and following some instructions, you can get the meaning behind these if conditions. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, welcome back to another coding exercise session of this section. So in this coding exercise, we would like to write a program that shows if a number is odd or even. Before we start the coding, we need to think about the statement of the program itself first. So if we want to, so we can break it down. So if we want to see if a number is odd or even, so we need to declare firstly one integer or float. So preferably integer. Otherwise, if it's float, we need to first round up or round down the number to be an integer, then do the mathematical formulation on it, like the mathematical operations on it. So firstly, we declare it, we read it from the user, and then using cin function, we can store it in the declared integer. Then, so far, these are the things that we learned from the previous section. And then we need to start writing our if conditions statements that we learned in the current section. So let's dive in. Firstly, we declare an integer called number. We show the cout message to the user saying that enter an integer. Then we store the integer using cin function in the integer named number. So this is straightforward. This is the steps that we have been using. And as of here, we need to define the if condition. So the if condition, as you remember, it's if, and within parentheses, we write the condition, and then within brackets, we write the statement that what do you want to do with the program if the condition is true, if the condition is okay, and if we enter the condition. And then we have the else, that the else does not need to have parentheses. However, if it's else if, we need to have the parentheses as we define the condition for the else if. But for the else, no definition is needed, because we are saying if this case is true, do this, and otherwise, in any other case, whatever the case is, just print another message. So this is why else does not have the parentheses for any predefined condition. So here we say that, okay, we read the number from the user. If the number divided by 2 and its remainder equals 0. So in order to make sure that if it's equal 0, we need to use 2 equals sign. When we use 1 equal sign, it returns error, saying that because we want in the C++ programming language, when we use 1 equal sign, it means that we want to assign a number to one variable, to one data type, for example. Previously, if you remember, we used to define int a equals 2. It means that at that time we were using only one equal sign.
it means that the number 2 is assigned to integer a. However, here we are not saying that we want to assign 0 to something. We're just making sure if the number that we have here that is divided by 2 and when we are using modula, it gives us the remainder of the division of number by 2. If this equals 0, so if it equals 0, we see the condition in the bracket. So in the bracket, we say that see out the number is even, because if a number is even, its remainder when it's divided by 2 must be 0. Otherwise, here we define else. Otherwise, the number is odd. So let's try it and see how it works. So I put a number like 20. It says the number is even because if 20 is divided by 2, its remainder equals 0. So this is why the number is even is printed. So if 20 is divided by 2, its remainder that we are looking for using modula sign here equals 0. It enters this condition and prints the number is even. However, let's compile again. So what if I write 13? So the number is odd. So let's see how the program gets there. So we enter the number, it is stored in this data type called number. Then it goes for the first condition first. So it goes there, it says that, okay, number divided by 2, the remainder is what? Is it equal to 0? If it's equal to 0, it enters. However, in this case that we put a 13 when it's divided by 2, its remainder is for sure not 0. So it does not enter this condition. And in escape, it escapes this condition and goes for the else, because we said if this condition does not pass, whatever the condition is, enter into the else function. There, it prints the number is odd. So let's try it once more. Like whatever the number is, like 101, the number is odd because again, it goes through the same procedure. Please make sure you practice these exercises before I start solving them. And also when you see this video, when you watch this video and you understand the procedure, go use your own machine, use your own laptop and try to implement this program several times. It helps you to get used to the syntaxes and how to write an if condition, for example. It looks easy and it is indeed easy, but after several times of trying, it becomes easy for you. Hi again, welcome back. So in this video, we're moving to the next coding exercise. It is asked that to write a program that reads two numbers from the user and we do a math operations. Like we also asks two numbers and also asks one math operations. Then perform the taken operations on the given numbers. So to do this, firstly, we know that we need to have at least two numbers to do the operations, and then one mathematical operations like we can consider addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. Then, based on these information that the user is giving, it computes the result. So let's dive in. First of all, we define two numbers called num1 and num2 as double. And then in order to store the math operations, we need a character because it's like the signs are like this. So these signs are able to be stored in one character, not like in data types like integer or float or double. So firstly, we start by showing the information, reading the input and storing it in the first number in num1 using scene function. Then we ask the user to enter one operator like plus, minus, times, division, and we store the operator in the OP that is initialized as a char. And then we ask the user to give us the second number. When the user says the second number, it is stored in num2 using cin function. So these are the things that we learned from the previous section. So if conditions here. In order to see what operation the user is asking and is looking for, we need to have if conditions. So here, if you remember from before, we have the if condition, and within the parentheses, we put the condition. We say that if OP, which was the math operator that the user gave us, equals, using two equal sign, equals plus. And this is plus is within two commas, let's say, because it's important to have it because it is a character. So then if this condition is true, it enters this bracket, and in this bracket we mentioned that the result is num1 plus num2, and we print the result for the user. However, if this condition is not true, the else if condition here is used. We mentioned that if OP equals subtraction, like in quotation mark or in quotation signs, if this condition is true, then enters the bracket. So when it enters the bracket using cout function, here, it prints the result saying that the result column, then we say num1 minus num2 and endl in the end. The same thing goes for the multiplication. We check else if the OP equals the star sign, and then if it's true, it enters here and do the mathematical formulation and write down the result to the output. And another thing that is here, the last but not the least, is the else if OP equals the division sign. But there is something that we need to make sure in the division sign. What is that? So if this condition is passed, it enters the statement part of this else if condition. So this part is all for this last else if. So here within this else if, we have another if. So it is nested if, let's say. So we check if num2 does not equal 0. If we want to check something that equals something, we use two equal sign. And if we want to make sure that it is not equal something, we have this exclamation mark and equal sign. So we make sure number 2 that the user gave us does not equal 0, because it's a problem. If we are going to divide a number by 0, it should returns an error. So here it says make sure this condition passes and number 2 does not equal 0, then enter this condition. Here, when that condition passed, we print the num1 divided by num2, and else, so else, what would be the condition for else? Whatever but not this condition, whatever but not this condition in this if statement. So in the if statement, we were saying num2 does not equal 0. So else would be whatever but not this, saying that, okay, if num2 equals 0, it is saying something like this, but it is like behind the scene. We need to understand it when we read the code. So it says if it equals 0, we return an error saying that division by 0. So the user knows that they made a mistake in the input file. And that's it. This is the end of this if and else nested conditions. And the last one that we saw here for the else if was here, and else that this else comes back to this level. You see, to this level, and like discussing these things, and this else is for this level. So it is, as you see, it starts a bit later in the line, so it's a nested if. So else, so if the user does not mention addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division, else we need to say invalid operator. So they made a mistake when they were entering the data. So let's try and see how it works. It would be easier to understand it after that. So enter the first number, I would say 20. Then it says enter one operator. I would say addition, and enter the second number. I would say 12. So it says the result is 32. So let's see the code and understand how it started doing it. So here, as you see, we had the first message, first number stored, the operator message, the operator stored in a character, and the third message, the second number stored in num2. Then it starts with the first if. It says op equals addition. So is it true? Yes, this is what I mentioned there. So it goes to this statement and says that the result, and then do the math part here. So let's do it again with other parts, like if I say this time 12 and we use the multiplication, and then I would say 2, it gives us the result 24. Let's see it from the code here. So it starts with this if condition. Does OP equals addition? No. Then it escapes simply. Else if. Does OP equals minus or subtraction? No. It then escapes again. It does not enter the statement. So here, does OP equals star sign? Yes. Then when it's true, it enters here and it does the calculation for us. So, and finally, let's do something with the division. So if I say the first number is 10, and we want to divide it by 2, for example, it gives us the result 5 as like the others. So let's see. So it starts from the here again. Does it equal addition? No. Does it equal subtraction? No. Does it equal the OP? Does it equal multiplication? No. Does it equal division? Yes. It enters then the condition. Okay, when it enters this condition, the following if condition must be met also. So here it checks again. If number 2, it says that the second number that we had here, like 2, does it equal 0 or not? If it does not equal 0, then enter here. So it doesn't. So number 2 was the number that I chose for this. So it says, okay, it does not equal to, then okay, it does the math formulation for us. But if, let me choose the second number to be 0, like I would say 10 division and then 0. What, okay, you see what the error is. So here it checks here, does OP equal division? Yes, it enters. It says, does num2, the second number, equals 0 or not? It says, does it equal 0 or not? So if it does not equal 0, it enters here. But since it is equal 0, it escaped this condition and goes exactly to this else part. It says that error, division by 0. So we need to make sure that we are not making error in the input file so it can compute something for us also. And let's try once more for the last time. I would say the first number is 10. Like, what is the operator that I would like to do? I would just write something like this. So for example, I made a typo or something, and the second number is 20. So here it says that invalid operator. So let's check. Here in this part, it checks Does it equal addition, subtraction, multiplication, division? No. Then it escapes all of these, and then it gets to this else part, saying that invalid operators, because it does not equal to neither of the above mentioned conditions. So this is how, in fact, this was a very good example of how if conditions work. I would suggest practicing these coding exercise many times so you can understand the logic behind it and also logic in the nested if conditions. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome back. Today we are going through another coding exercise that we can practice a little bit more the if conditions. So we need to write a program that reads a number from the user, preferably a non-negative number, and calculate its square root. In order to break down this program is that firstly we need to read one number, then we store the number, and then we check if this number is a non-negative number, and if it's not a non-negative number, we calculate its square root. And if you remember from previous section, we had the square root library function in C++. So we can easily let C++ to do that part. We just need to call it. So let's dive in. Here we initialize a double called number. We show a message to the user saying that enter a non-negative number, and then we store it using cin function. Then we go through the if condition. So if number is smaller than 0, we need to return an error to the user saying that, okay, you're using one invalid input. So please not do that. So here it goes to this statement and says that invalid input. Else means that any number above 0. Which is the case, which is what we are looking for. Else, then here we compute the square root of the number and we assign it to a new double initialized here that is named result. Then in the next line, we print out the result. So let's try and compile and see how it works. So enter a non-negative number. I would say like 16. The square root is 4. So let's go through the procedure through the code. Show a message. We enter a number. It is stored using cin function. Then it goes to the first if condition, like if number smaller than 0. Does this pass? No, because it's not the case. So it escapes this part and goes for the else. Then in the else part, because it makes sense, it goes through the condition and calculate the square root, assign it to result, and then show the result here to us. So let's try it another time. Enter a non-negative number, I would say 25. So this time gives us 5. In order to check the other if condition, like what if we choose an invalid input, I would say like -5. Okay, it says invalid input. So that if condition is working correctly. One important thing to note is that when we are considering if conditions, it's nice when we want to test the efficiency and when we want to test the efficiency of the code or verification of the code, it would be nice to test it with different input values and make sure all the if conditions are working greatly and working correctly. This is very important thing because later when we have like a lot of lines of code, if something goes wrong, it's very hard to find it. We need to go through the debugging steps that we learn in another probably topic like for the intermediate or advanced level. But this is something to note that now that we are learning from 0, it's important to know that we need to validate our code as we are proceeding through the coding. Welcome to another coding exercise session. Here we want to write a program that reads a number between 0 and 1 from the user and check if the number is equal or greater than 0.5. It rounds up the number
to the nearest integer, and otherwise it rounds down the number. In order to do that, we first declare a double number. We ask the user to give us their input value, input number. We store it using cin function, and then we go through the if condition. So the condition here that we put, if the number that we read from the user, is greater or equal than 0.5. If this is true, round up the number using a ceil library function that we know from before. So we learned it in the previous section. If you don't remember it, it would be nice to review those lectures. Then using this ceil library function, we can easily round up the number. And else, so else means that if it's lower than this 0.5, it will round down the number using the floor library function. So let's try and see. So the machine would ask us to enter a floating number. I would say like 0.8. It rounds up. It goes for the first condition. Let's verify it here. Yeah. So it goes to the first if condition. It sees that it's correct. It's true. It makes sense. Then it enters the if condition and do the statement that we have written here. Using ceil function, it rounds up the number. Let's try it once more. So if I say, for example, 0.5, it still rounds up to 1. Why? Because we say equal, greater equal than 0.5. If it was only greater than 0.5, it would have rounded down this number. But because it is greater equal, it rounds up the number. So let's try it once more with another, to go through the else condition. Let's put another number, for example, like this one. It rounded down the number. So it checks the if condition here, saying that, okay, it doesn't pass this condition, so it does not enter this statement. Then it escapes to the else, and else is here. So the floor, using the floor library function, we round down the number. But there is something here, so something that you can practice. This is the practice test for you. So here it says that we enter something between 0 and 1, but in this coded program, we don't check if the number that the user has entered is actually between 0 and 1. So it needs another if condition. So firstly, we read the number, we store it from the user, and then we first check to see if the number is between 0 and 1 or not. If this is not between 0 and 1, then we show a message to the user saying that, yeah, this is the invalid input, this is not valid, this is the number that you entered is not between 0 and 1. And then we go, if it passes through that condition saying that, okay, it is between 0 and 1, then it enters this if condition. It would be a nice practice for you to do that. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. Today we are going to discuss the assignment that I mentioned in previous video about coding exercise number 14. So here I mentioned we solved the problem like it was like if the number greater equal than 0.5, it rounds up the number, the output, and otherwise it rounds down the number to 0. However, we didn't check if the input number is actually between 0 and 1. In order to do that, we need to use nested if conditions. So here I added the code. So this part is like the previous video. It's like we just initialize the number, then we read the number from the user and store it using cin function. But before going through the round up and round down procedure, we first check if number is greater than 0. If this is true, enter this if condition. So, and then if number is lower than 1, then if this is true, then it enters this condition to round up or round down like before. However, the else condition here is that, okay, maybe the number is greater than 0, but it is not lower than 1. So then here it shows the message saying that invalid input. So this is the important thing that we need to consider. So let's try. So the program is working like before, like I would say 0.7, it rounds up. And if I say 0.2, it rounds down. So let's go through the procedure here once more. So it starts with this if condition. The number is greater than 0, yes, it enters. The number is lower than 1, yes, it enters. Then it says the number is greater or equal 0.5. It's not true. Then it escapes this part and then goes to this else section, which we round down the number. So let's see. We need to write something between 0 and 1, but we write something like 20. It says invalid input. But why? So it checks if the number is greater than 0. It's true, then it enters. Then it checks here if the number is lower than 1. It does not pass this condition. So it escapes everything that is in this if condition, like until here. You see the bracket closes here. Then goes to the else condition saying that, okay, let's just print out the invalid input so the user would understand that they made a mistake. Welcome back. Here we are discussing another coding exercise. So it asks us to write a program that takes the amount of the purchase. Like imagine you're working in a mall that you want to sell your product, and as a salesperson you want to sell the product, or you're coding the sale system. So when you're coding the sales system, you need to keep this in mind. This is the new rule that the manager mentioned. For example, anyone that goes beyond $500 when they're purchasing our products like t-shirts, we can give them 20% of discount. However, if the amount of the purchase of our customer is lower than $500, no discount is available. So now we want to design a program that computes this amount of discount. I mean they consider this amount of discount and give us the final price that we need to ask the customer to pay. So here we firstly initialize a double called amount. We ask the user to enter the amount that they want to purchase, for example, and we store it using cin function. Then we enter the if condition saying that if that amount is higher than 500, which is our case, enter this condition. So then we initialize a new double called discount. The discount is calculated as amount times 20% of it. And when we calculate the discount, here we are again assigning a new number to the amount that we initially got from the customer. This is the important part. So we calculate this discount number using this formula. So the 20% of amount, okay? So far we calculated the discount, and here the amount is the value that we read from the user, and here we stored it. So we are saying that the amount that from now we are assigning a new value to the amount. We are saying that amount equals the previous amount that was read from the user minus the discount we calculated here. So we are reassigning the value of the amount after the discount. Then saying that 20% discount applied, final amount, and then we print it. And else means that if the purchase was lower than $500, for example, we print no discount applied and we show the final amount. So the final amount would be this amount. The difference is that when we go through this if condition, we reassign the value of amount. But if we don't go through this if condition, the amount stays the same amount that the customer entered initially. Let's compile the program, we will understand it better. So enter the amount. I would say 290. It says no discount applied. Final amount 290. So it first starts with this if condition. Does it pass? No, because 290 is lower than 500. Then it skips this part and goes for the else. And for the else, it says no discount applied. Final amount is amount. So it prints us the amount, which is 290. However, if we have like a number larger than 500, let's say 700, it says that 20% discount applied and the final amount is 560. Let's go through the steps. So it goes to this part of the if condition. Does it pass? Yes, it passes. So it enters here. When it enters here, it starts calculating the amount of discount. So the amount of discount is based on 20% of the total amount. So the total amount here was 700. 700 times 20%. So it calculates the amount of discount, and we assign it to we assign this formula to the discount. So now we know what the discount number is. And we know the amount that the customer entered initially, which is 700. So 700 minus the discount will be the new value for the amount. So the new value, or let's say the final amount that they need to pay. So we are reassigning again in this if condition the value of amount. Then we simply just print the amount to the terminal for the customer. This is a very straightforward way of calculating discount. It has a wide range of application. As you know, in many malls or shopping centers, when there is a sale season, they just apply simply this coding to their system. So it computes the amount of discount automatically. Welcome back. In this video, we are going through another coding exercises regarding the if conditions. So here we would like to write a program that takes an integer from the user and checks if it's within the range of 10 to 50. So if the number is less than 10, it prints too low. And if the number is more than 50, it prints too high. And if it is within the range of 10 and 50, it prints in range. To do that, we initialize a number. We mention to the user saying that enter a number, and we store the number, and then we go through the if conditions. So firstly, we need to check if the number is greater equal than 10 or not. So if this condition is true, it enters this part. So between these two brackets. Else, so if the number is lower than 10, it goes to this else directly and says too low. So the too low part, it's very straightforward. So if the number is greater or equal 10, it enters this statement of the if condition. Otherwise, this else will be activated and it says too low. So what if the number is greater or equal than 10? Then we need to check it again. So we check again saying that, okay, now the number is greater or equal than 10. However, we need to check to see if the number is also smaller or equal than 50. So if this condition passes, it says in range, and else it says too high. So let's imagine I enter one number called, like, say 2. So it starts here. If the number is greater or equal than 10, so no, because my number is 2, it escapes everything that is here and go to this else part and print too low. if my number is 20, it goes for the first if condition, saying that, okay, 20 is greater than 10, then it enters. Then it enters here. Then it checks again. So my number was 20. It says the number is lower equal 50. Is it true? Yes. If it's true, it prints the in range, and that's it. However, if my number, for example, was 100, although it passes the first condition, which is greater or equal than 10, it does not pass the second condition that must be lower than equal to 50. So if it does not pass through this condition, it goes to this else part, saying that it's too high. Let's try. So we mentioned here, like if the number is 2, it says too low, which is true. And then if the number is like 110, it says it's too high. Let's say why. So it's too high, and the reason is it says, okay, the number is greater or equal than 10, it enters, then it checks to see whether the number is lower or equal 50 or not. It's not. Then it goes for this else condition, which is too high. And if I choose a number within the range of 10 and 50, like say 25, it says it is in range. So here it checks, okay, it's greater than 10, it's lower than 50, then so it prints us the in range message in the terminal. Try to practice this exercise on your own and try to do it several times so you get convenient with the syntaxes of if condition. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. Today we want to write a program that asks a user for a test score, something between 0 and 100, and then classify it as failing if the score is lower than 50, passing if the score is between 50 and 69, and good if the score is between 70 and 84, and excellent if the score is 85 or above. To do that, we need to use several if conditions. So please pause the video and think about it. Try to see how you can solve it and how many if conditions are necessary to write such a program. If you have already thought about this and tried to see if you can code it or not, now you may continue. So here we initialize a score, an integer called score, and we mentioned to the user saying that enter your test score, something between 0 and 100, and then store the input of the user. Then we start with an if condition saying that if the score is below 50, as it was suggesting here, so if the score is below 50, sorry, here, yeah, just print out failing, and that's it. This part is very straightforward. And then we write down else if. So else if would be the score is greater equal 50. And in this situation, when the score is greater equal 50, there are several conditions to check because we are having different grading system here. Like we want to show the message saying passing or good or excellent. So we need to distinguish. Being above 50 is not enough. So being in a range is enough to know which score lies in which category. For example, between 50 and 69, we need to say passing. However, between 70 and 84, we need to print good. To do that, we check, okay, else if the score is above 50. Then it's a nested if inside the else if that is here. So with the first one we start. So if the score is greater equal than 50 and if the score at the same time is lower equal 69, let's say passing. This is exactly the condition that we had here for the passing. And if this is not the case, so if the score is still greater equal 50, but it is not lower than 69, what do we do here is we check another situation, that is this part. So we escape this part if it's not below 69. We check this part saying that, okay, if the score is above 50 and above 70, this is the else if function that we check. Then it passes through these two conditions to check. So the first one is lower than 84, good, and else, if it's not lower than 84, it means that it is above 84, which is the 85 and above. So it's excellent. Let me run the program and try different numbers and start analyzing the code. I think it would be easier for you to grasp the idea behind it. So if the score is like 40, it says failing. It's very straightforward. So if the score is below 50, it simply prints the failing message. So let's go for the next category. For example, I would say if the score is 65, it would say passing. So let's analyze the code. Analyzing the code is very important. For you also, when you are trying to understand if your program is not working correctly, it would be nice to start analyzing the code and see what the problem is and where the problem is, in fact. So here it starts from this if condition. It says that, is it below 50? No. Then it escapes this part and directly goes to this else if condition here. It says, okay, is it above 50? Yes. And it enters this condition, this part now. You see the bracket, these two red brackets. So if it's above 50, our number was 65. It starts checking again. So here it checks, okay, now the number is above 50, but is it at the same time lower than 69? Yes. So it enters and prints us this passing condition here. So let's try another number, like 75 instead of that. So it says good. How come? Let's analyze it. Here it starts from here. It says that is it below 50? No. So it escapes. It goes to this else if condition. And when it goes to this else if condition, it says, is it above 50? Yes. Is it lower than 69? No. Then it escapes this part. Is it above 70? Yes. So it enters this condition between these two brackets. At the same time that it is above 70. Is it lower than 84? Yes. If it's true, then it prints the good printout. And if the number is not passing this condition that says that it is below 84, it prints the else part here. Excellent. Let's write another number here. Like my number is 95. It prints excellent. So here starts the condition. Is it below 50? No, it escapes and goes to this part. Is it above 50? Yes, it enters. Is it below 69? No. And then, is it above 70? Yes, it enters these between these two. It enters this statement and we need to choose between these two. The machine needs to choose between these two. Okay, is it above 70? Yes. Is it below 84? No. Then it's above 85 because it says lower equal to 84. Then when it's not passing this condition, it's above 85 equal
Welcome back to another lesson. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about ternary operator. The ternary operator is a shortened way to write an if-else statement in a single line. So it's a compact and efficient way to make simple decisions in code. The ternary operator is often used to simplify and shorten the conditional expressions. For example, here we see the condition we want to check. So we put it like here. The syntax looks something like this. So the condition that we want to check is this place. And then if this condition is true, the expression returns value if true. And otherwise, it returns value if false. And the question mark there separates the condition from the possible outcomes. So this is the condition. We separate it from the possible outcomes, and then we have the value if true and value if false. And colon here separates the value if true and the value if false. But how it works, we will see in a few seconds. Here, let's uncomment some code that we have. So, for example, previously we learned that if we want to understand if a number is even or odd, we need to write an if condition. Here I am initializing one integer value named number with number 5, and we are initializing one string named result. So we say that if the number is divided by 2 and its remainder equals to 0, so using the modulo sign we can find the remainder, and the remainder is 0, the result will return the even. However, if this condition is not correct, then the result it is assigned with the odd. So let's try and check it out. Compiling here, no error. Yes, so we have nothing in the output because we forgot to see out. Here is the output, and then we write result. So this is important to show the output result also. Okay, let's run again. So here is the output odd. So this is odd. Why? Because the number 5, when it is divided to 2, the remainder does not equal 0. So this is how we used to do it while we were writing the if conditions. However, if we are going to use ternary operators to write the same code, it will look something like this. So we ask the user to, for example, give us one number, and we store the result. Then here, instead of these lines about the if and else conditions checking, we simply write down the result equals, so we initialize the result as a string here directly. The result equals number, and here we write down the conditions. If you remember, I mentioned this conditions, question mark, and two possibilities separated by a colon here. So number, if it's divided by 2, its remainder equals to 0. So it is now separated with a question mark with the possible outcomes that are even and odd. So if this condition is true, it's going to print the first true value here. If this is not true, it will print us the odd value. So the odd value will be assigned to result if this condition is not correct. And if this condition is correct, even is going to be assigned to the result. So let's run the code and see. So if I say 10, it returns the value is even, the number is even. So let's go through the analyzing the code once more. So here the number is stored. We initialize a string called result, and its value equals to the condition of if the number, if this number is divided by 2, its remainder equals 0. If this is correct, the first condition is even, so even will be assigned to result. And if this condition is not correct, then this value, this result will be assigned to this result. Okay, so and they are separated by semicolon. And if you see, we simply could check the condition in one line here. However, we used to check it in like a few lines here, like 4 or 5 lines. So when we have a straightforward checking condition, it would be more efficient to use ternary operators. In the next lectures, we are going to practice some examples and coding exercises, so it will be more clear for you how it works. Hi, welcome back to another coding exercise. In the previous lesson, we discussed how we differentiate ternary operator with normal if-else condition statements. In this lesson, we are giving you another example. So here, the program, we want to write a program that says to check if a score is taken from the user and the number is something between 0 and 100. So if the number is larger, equal 50, return the pass. And if the number is not larger, equal 50, return fail. So previously, when we wanted to do that, we had to write if statement condition saying that if the score is larger, equal 50, go through the cout function and print pass, and else print fail. However, so it would take like 2-3 lines at least. So here we can write it down in one line. We initialize one integer. We show this to the user, and they enter their score, and we store their score. And we initialize this one string that is called result, and in the parentheses we mention the condition that we want to check, and this condition is separated from the possible outcomes using one question mark. So we write down the condition we want to check. If the score greater equal 50, then one option is pass, one option is fail. So these two possible outcomes are also separated with a colon. So if this condition is true, the first option will be assigned to result. And if this function, if this statement is false, then the fail is going to be assigned to result. And finally, we print the result here like this. So we will print like cout u and then the score and then the exam. So we would say you pass the exam or you fail the exam. So let's try this one to see how it works. So it says that enter one number. I would say 88. You pass the exam because 88 is greater than 50, and it returns, because this condition is true, it returns the first possible outcome. And if we try it more with another example, it will be like 30 and you failed the exam. Why? Because the first condition, the condition is not true. It's going to escape the first option and return the second option, and the second option is going to be assigned to result. Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to have another coding exercise for a ternary operator. So the question is asking us, that to write a program that checks if someone is eligible to vote or not. If the person is 18 years old or above, the person can vote and the person is eligible for voting. Otherwise, the person is not eligible to vote. So we want to do this with ternary operator. So previously, when we wanted to do this with if else statement, we could define one if condition. So, and we would say if age is greater or equal to 18, we print eligible to vote. Otherwise, we print not eligible to vote. However, here in only one line, we can use ternary operator to do that. So the first we initialize an integer called age, then we ask the user, we store the input, and then we initialize one string called result here. We put the condition within the parentheses saying that if we don't write if, but the statement says that age equal greater 18. So if this condition is correct, the first output will be assigned to the result. And if this condition is not correct, the second output is going to be assigned to the result. And please note that the condition is separated from the potential outcome using a question mark. And also the potential outcomes are separated from each other using a colon here. And then we are going to print the result. So let's try and see how it works. Let's try. So now it's compiling and I would say 20. It says you're eligible to vote. Why? The reason is that the condition is true, so the first outcome is assigned to result. Let's try it once more. So when we try it again, we put for example, the number 15, and it says that you're not eligible to vote. Sorry. So this is how easy this ternary operator is. Keep practicing it, and where possible, you just use this condition instead of using if else condition. Welcome back. So let's try another coding exercise using ternary operator. So here we would like to check if a number that is read from the user is positive, negative, or zero. To do that, we initialize it, we read the data from the user, we store it, and then we initialize a string named result. So the condition here that we want to check is that to see if the number is greater than zero. So if this condition is true, it's going to give us the output of positive. So the positive is going to be assigned to result, and then the result is going to be printed in the terminal. So the condition is separated from the potential outcome with a question mark. And if this condition is not correct, the second outcome should be checked. But the second outcome here is another condition. So if a number is positive, so positive is assigned to result. However, if the number is not positive, the machine will go and check the second condition. And the second condition here is that if the number is lower than zero, so, and it is separated with a question mark from the possible outcome. So if this condition is true, negative is going to be assigned to result. And if this condition is not true, then 0 is going to be assigned to result. And finally, the result is going to be shown here. Let's try and see how it works. So now I'm compiling. So enter an integer, I would say 12. So it says the number is positive. So when it says the number is positive, what I see here is that, so it checks the first condition, is it is the number greater than 0? Yes, then the positive is going to be assigned to the result, and then the result is going to be printed in the output. Let's try another number to see how it works with other numbers, like I would say minus 15. It says that the number is negative, but how it gets there? So it checks the first condition. The number, is it greater than 0? No. So this option is not going to be assigned to result. So positive is not going to be assigned. Then it goes for the second option, but the second option itself is another condition. So then it checks the condition here. Is the number below 0? Yes, in our case, yes. So the negative is going to be assigned to the result, and the result is going to be shown in the terminal. Let's try with another number. So this time I'm going to set 0, and it says the number is 0. So let's analyze the code. So the first condition is not passed, so the positive is not assigned to result. And when the condition is not true, it's going to the second part. So the second part is another condition. It checks whether the number is lower than 0 or not. Is it true? No. Then, because it's not true, then negative is not going to be assigned to the result. But the second option, which is 0, is going to be assigned to the result. And then result is shown using this code in the terminal. Hello again. In today's lesson, we are going to discuss logical operators. So logical operators are used to combine or modify conditions in if and else if and other decision-making structure. So there are two main logical operators. There are other logical operators, but there are two main logical operators that we are going to discuss in today's lesson. So for the first one is the AND condition, and the second one is the OR condition. So the AND condition is when we want to modify two things. If you remember in previous exercises, when we were having else conditions and when we wanted if and else if conditions, when we wanted to check, for example, to see if a number is within a range. For example, to see if a number is between 10 and 20, we had to define one if condition saying that if the number is larger than 10, and in the statement of this if condition, as a nested if, we were adding another if, saying that okay, the first if is passed, the second if is to see if the number is smaller than 20. So something like this. Let me write it down. Something like this. We were like int a equals 22, for example. And we were checking to see if a is greater than 10. Then we were checking again if a is lower than 20, and then we were saying correct number in the output, something like this. You see, so there is one if condition here and another if condition here. However, using the AND condition, we can write these examples easier. So let's dive in. Let's see how it works. So for example, here, I would uncomment these lines to see how it works. So basically, we ask the user to enter their age, and if their age is above 18, and then we enter these conditions of the if, and the statement consists of if and else itself, saying that okay, now it's above 18, but if it's below 65, you are eligible to work. But if it's above 18 and it's not below 65, it's probably something like 66 and above, it says you're not in the working age range. And if this age is not above 18 initially, it says that you're not in the working age range. So let's compile this and see how it works. So this is if statement that we learned already. So I would say like 50, 60, sorry, and it says you are eligible to work. However, there are some ways to write this code in an easier way using logical operators. So it makes it more efficient and concise. So as you see, everything is about efficiency in the code to help having a better code. So here we are reading the age from the user and storing it. Instead of having two conditions, like one if here and another nested if here, we are only having one if here, saying that if age equals greater 18 and at the same time it is lower equal 65, then you write in the output that you're eligible to work. And the second logical operator is this. So we say else if, then we say if age is below 18 or using these signs, age is above 65, you're not eligible to work. So what are the differences between and or? So this is and this is or. So and if we are writing a condition statement using and, it must meet the condition before and the condition after and at the same time. So if both of these two conditions are passed, then we print these to the terminal. However, regarding the or condition here, or logical operator, if either of the conditions are met, we print this one. So this is the difference. Both conditions should be met here in the AND operator, but here either of these should be met. Let's try this program and see how it works. So, okay, I would say 18. It says you're not in the working range because so it checks here 80 is not in this range, and then it checks here, okay, 80 is passing one of the conditions, then directly goes to this place. So let's try another one. So I would say like 10, it says you're not in the working range again, because when it sees that the 10 is lower than 18, it directly prints that you're not in the working condition. So using logical operator will help us to have a more efficient and concise and shorter lines of code. It's nice to think of how you can make your code more efficient and not just to write a code that works, but an efficient code that works perfectly in a shorter amount of time, in a lower number of lines to write the code and implement it. In the next lectures, we are going to practice some logical operators. Welcome back. Let's try some more coding exercises for logical operator. So we would like to write one program that checks to see if the number that is read from the user is divisible by both 3 and 5. So here we read the number from the user, we store it. Using logical operator, we check to see the number if it is divided by 3, and using modular sign we can see its remainder. So the remainder of the number divided by 3, is it equal to 0 or not? So if it if it equals 0, and at the same time, when the number is divided by 5, its remainder equals 0, and both of these two conditions are true, then we print this to the terminal for the user. Otherwise, we say that, okay, this number is not the number that we are looking for. So let's compile to see how it works. So for the AND logical operator, both of the conditions must be true. So if I mention 3, it says, no, your number is not divisible by both 3 and 5. Why? When 3 is divided by 3, okay, the remainder equals 0. However, for this case, for the second condition, it doesn't work. Let's try another number. So if I put 5 here, again, we have the same message here. It says that, okay, this is not divisible because the second condition is correct because the number is 5. So 5 divided by 5, the remainder would be 0. However, for the first condition, it's not true, it's not correct. Therefore, it escapes this if condition and directly goes to the else and print the outcome that the number is not divisible by both 3 and 5. So let's try another number. I would say 15 this time, and this time it says that, okay, the number is the number that we are looking for. Because 15 divided by 3, its remainder would be 0, and the same goes with this statement, this if condition, saying that if 15 is divided by 5, its remainder equals 0. Therefore, this statement is printed in the output. As you see, working with logical operator helps us to write a more efficient code. It would be nice a priori to writing a program, think about it deeply to see how we can integrate these features that are there for us to make our code more efficient and more advanced and concise. Hello and welcome to another coding exercise. So let's try some more coding exercises using logical operator. So we would like to see if someone can watch a movie or not. And the rules for watching a movie here is that either the person should be above 13 years old, or the person is accompanied with an adult if the age is not above 13. So to do that, we initialize an integer called age, and we initialize a boolean with adult. So the boolean can only take two values, if you remember, 0 or 1. So we ask the user to enter their age and also mention that if they are being accompanied by an adult, 1 for yes and 0 for no. And the result is stored in with adult boolean using scene function. Then simply we here check the condition using OR logical operator. So in the OR logical operator, if you remember correctly, either of the conditions should be correct, not both of them necessarily. If both of them are correct, it's okay. But if one of them is correct, it's still okay, and it enters the condition and reads the statement in the condition. So here it says that are you 13 or above, or are you being accompanied by an adult? If either of these two conditions are correct, then you can watch the movie. Otherwise, you cannot watch the movie. So what would be the option that is otherwise? The otherwise would be the option like you are below 13 and you're not accompanied by an adult. So let's try and see how it works. I would say the age is 20. Are you being accompanied by an adult? No, I'm not. So you can watch the movie. So here is it. Here it is. So The age is 20. So 20 is larger than 30. The first condition is met. And are you being accompanied by another adult? No, I said 0. And the second condition is not met. But because this is the OR logical operator, one of the conditions only is okay to be met. So it enters and says that, okay, you can watch the movie. But here, if it was and logical operator, it was not allowing me to go and watch movie if not both of the conditions are met. So let's try another one. So I would say I am 10. Are you accompanied by an adult? I would say yes. It says you can watch the movie. So I am not older than 13. However, I am being accompanied by an adult. So the first condition is not met, but the second condition is met. Therefore, we enter here. So let's try another one. I would say, how old are you? I would say 8. Are you accompanied by an adult? I would say no. You cannot watch the movie. Why? Because neither the first condition nor the second conditions are met. So this is why it skips this part and then goes to the else part and says that you cannot watch the movie. Hi, welcome back to another coding exercise for logical operator. So here we would like to write a program that checks to see if a number is between 5 and 15. In order to do that, we need to use a logical operator for efficiency. We initialize one integer, we get the data from the user, we store the data, and we write down the if condition using OR logical operator. So we check if the number is lower than 5 or the number is above 15, the number is outside of the range. Otherwise, the number is within the range. So let's compile and see how it works. So if I say 19, it says the number is outside of the range because so the number is above 15, it says it's outside. And if we write something like 2, it says the number is again outside of the range because 2 is lower than 5. So if I write another number like 10, it says, okay, the number is within the range. But this is written like OR operator. Instead of having this OR operator, we could have AND operator. So we could write something like if the number is greater than 5 and number is lower than 15, number is in the range outside the range. So by changing some by doing some minor changes in the condition, we can see that we can use AND operator instead of OR operator. Let's try and see. So I would say, now I would say 19. It says the number is out because 19 is not in this range. Therefore, it says the number is outside. If I, for example, like 3, it says again the number is outside the range because it's not in this range. It's the number is not above 5 and at the same time below 15. However, if I put like 11, it will say, okay, the number is in the range 5 to 15. So you see, with small changes, we can use either of the logical operator. To do that, you need to practice. Please practice all of these coding exercises yourself several times so you can get used to it and also you can get yourself familiarized with the syntaxes of C++. Hello everyone, welcome back to another lesson. Today we are going to discuss about Boolean flags and how they can be integrated in our if statement conditions and if else conditions. So previously we learned about logical operators. For example, here we initialize one integer, we read the score from the user and then store it. And then using AND logical operators, we check if the number is above 50 and lower than 100, then we print out the you passed the quiz and otherwise you failed. So this we learned previously. Let's try and see this one. So for example, I would say if my score is 76, it says you passed the quiz. It's very straightforward. We discussed this already. However, if we integrate Boolean flags into this if-else condition, it gives a descriptive name to the condition, making the purpose of the if statement clear and easier to understand when the code is shared with others. And also, they can help keep track of whether something has happened or a specific state has been reached in your program or not. So therefore, they can help us to reduce the error as well because we don't have to repeat certain complex, logic repeatedly. So let me give you an example. I will comment this part and then I will do the same. I will rewrite the same code, however, using the Boolean flags. So instead of only initializing the integer, I am also here initializing a Boolean data type that is called passed quiz. So here initially I put it to false. It's your call, but usually when we want to use the Boolean flags, we initialize them to a false value, and then when the condition is met, we set it to true. So initially, by default, they usually are false. So here we show the message to the user saying that enter your score and then we store it. Here we mention that if the score is above 50 and less than 100 using AND logical operator just like before, if this is the case, don't right away print, okay, you passed the exam. Set the Boolean flag to true instead of false. That was by default initialized. So set it to true. And if this is the case, set it to true. So we don't have to write the else condition. So we are avoiding writing this else condition. We are just writing one if condition. So if this happens, the condition is passed, therefore the passed quiz boolean is set to true. Then in the end, we can check this condition saying that if passed quiz equals true, then you pass the exam, and else or otherwise you failed. Let's try this one. So it's compiling. Now I would say 75 and it returns pass. Why? Let's analyze the code. Here it checks the number with these conditions. It passes and then set true to passed quiz, and then because the passed quiz equals true, it prints that you passed the exam. Also, this part is redundant. We can also remove this. So by default, when we use a Boolean flag, so when we write no conditions for them, it means that if they are true, it's like that. So let's compile again. So we can eliminate that part as I mentioned. So now I would say 87 and it prints you passed the quiz. So easily, you don't even have to mention that if it equals true. The fact that you put the Boolean flag there without anything, it means that, okay, if this is true, this is something by default known by the C++ compiler. So this way you can avoid the second else and let the decision be made only with this one. And of course, you need to add another if conditions to print out your result, but this way you are making your code to be more readable. So its readability is increased, and it is very common among programmers to use Boolean flag because it gives a description to your if condition. So this if condition is defined because we want to make sure if the person is passed or not. However, here, okay, after reading the code, we understand that yes, this if condition is defined because we want to check if the guy is passing the test or not. However, it is only showing a message saying that, but in this place, we are assigning true to past quiz. So you see the difference is that this code is more readable, it reduces the error and helps to increase the readability of your code. Thank you for watching. In next lectures, we are going to practice a little bit if statements with Boolean flags. Welcome back. Today we are going to do some coding exercises regarding the Boolean flag. So the program is asking that write a program that checks using Boolean flag if a user wants to continue or not. So for example, I don't know, you're playing a game or something like that, and the program will ask you, do you want to continue playing or not? So if you want to continue playing, you should push the button yes, otherwise no. And depending on your choice, the reaction of the system would be different. Here, we are going to do that using Boolean flag. So we initialize a character called choice and a Boolean flag named wants to continue. And we initialize it to false. As I mentioned, it's by default. We use it to false. If it's true, we then set the true to it. So we show the message to the user, do you want to continue? Yes or no? So the choice is stored using scene function, and it's a character, so it only can get y or n. Then we write an if condition saying that if the choice equals y, then set true for the wants to continue boolean that was by default set to false. So when the user says yes and says y, the true is assigned to wants to continue. And we don't print anything up to here, okay? We don't print any results, let's say, because previously we were printing the message to the user through the terminal. Then we check if wants to continue, you chose to continue, else you chose not to continue. And as we discussed in the previous video, we don't need to write down equal true, for example, for wants to continue. By default, when we write down the boolean in the if condition, it is considered by default by the compiler that you're saying like if this is true. So even if you don't write equals true, it understands like you were writing if this is true, if this equals true, for example, something like this. So let's try it out and see how it works. So I would say y, it says you chose to continue. Let's analyze the code once more. So I said y, it then set true to wants to continue, and it says, okay, if wants to continue equals true, then you print you chose to continue. Otherwise, you chose not to continue. Let's try again. I would say n, it says you chose not to continue. You chose not to continue. So as we mentioned here, it helps to have a better code and a meaningful code saying that giving a meaning to the if statement of your code by using Boolean flag. And little by little, when you get to more advanced level and start reading other people's code, usually programmers that are in higher levels, they use Boolean because it gives some meaning to the if else conditions. Because when you read this code, the programmer, the reader who knows C++ would understand that, okay, the aim behind writing this if condition was to see if the user mentioned yes or no, rather than just printing a message and showing the result. Okay, because this is something we show here to we showed to you to see it so you can have understanding and to see how the output would change depending on the input. But usually when, for example, we have a program like the game that I mentioned earlier, if you say you want to continue, you probably get back to the game and continue playing. And if you say no, you probably get out of the game and exit the game. So these messages usually do not show in the terminal and actions are being done behind the scene. But we are just printing these things to show how the input can make the difference on the output, how they can have impact on the output rather than just showing the messages. So the reason behind showing the messages is this, so you can understand the procedure and how changing in the input can impact the output. So as I explained, Boolean flags are very important to be used. So think about them and start using them little by little in your practices and exercises. Thank you for watching. Welcome back to another coding exercise session. Today we are going to do some further exercises for the Boolean flags. So we want to write a program that checks if a number is even or odd using Boolean flags. So we initialize a number here, and then we initialize a Boolean called isEven equals false by default. Then we get the input from the user, we store it, and we say if the number modulo 2 means that if the number is divided by 2 and its remainder using modulo sign equals 0, then set true for isEven Boolean that was initially set to false. And then if isEven is true, then print the number is even, else the number is odd. Let's try it. It's 20. Yeah, the number is even. Let's try once more. 21. The number is odd. So here, I think after having a few coding exercises and seeing a few examples, you realize the importance of using if flag, Boolean flag, and in the if statements, showing that how useful it can be, and you will understand the logic behind it after doing a little bit of exercises, and you will see that, okay, it is making my program looks better, more advanced, and more less encounter to any errors and repetition. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome to another lesson. Today we are going to talk about switch function. So the switch statement is a control structure used in C++ to simplify decision making when dealing with multiple conditions. So it is an efficient and readable alternative to using multiple if-else statements, especially when we have several potential outcomes. So it helps us to have a more organized code and more clearly handling outputs when we have like several of them. So let's start with an example. Here we used if-else conditions. We say, okay, we initialize the integer called day with the value of 3. Then we say if day equals 1, print Monday. If it equals 2, print Tuesday, etc. until the end, until if day equals 7, print Sunday. And else invalid input. So all of them, the first one is if, the other ones are else if until the end. If neither of the above conditions are correct, just print invalid day. So let's try this code and see how it works. So it is printing Wednesday because we mentioned the day equals 3, then 3 here, and we are printing the Wednesday. But as you can see here, we're checking many conditions, and it's really hard to go through all these lines because there are many conditions to be checked. Instead of doing this, we can use switch condition. But let's first discuss how switch condition structure would be. So instead of saying if, we write switch, and then we write down the variable in the parentheses. Then we open the bracket, and when we open the bracket, we check the case with the first condition, again case, second condition, case with the third condition, and then as a default, it is exactly working like else. So if neither of the above mentioned cases were there, we use the default. When we write down the case, we write down the conditions, we put semicolon, and we go to the next line, and we execute the code whatever we want, and then we must write down break. So the program exit when enters this statement after executing whatever it needs to execute, it breaks. Otherwise, it also goes for the next case, and it also goes for the next case. So it is important for us to manually break it. So let's do the example. It would be more clear how it works. So let me uncomment these lines, and then we run the code that we have here. So already when looking at this code and comparing it with this code, you see that even it looks nicer. There are some spaces between them, and you can read it much easier. So we say the input is day, and it is set to 3, and instead of if, we write down switch, and we put the day. So the day is our variable that we are trying to check some conditions over this variable. Then instead of having multiple if else if conditions, we are just mentioning case, 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 case until the end. So if case, instead of saying if day equals 1, we say case 1. It means if day equals 1. But instead of writing all of those things, we say case 1, case 2, case 3. It means that when our case, which is day here, equals 1, equals 2, equals 3. But we don't write those things. This is why it makes the program much easier. And then we have the semicolon, we go to next line, and we say, okay, if you enter this condition, print Monday. If you enter this condition, print Tuesday, etc. until the end. And we need to remember, we don't have to forget this break. We need to write down the break at the end of each case. And there is, instead of having the else after having all of these cases, we have a default here saying that if neither of the above things happened, if none of them were true, so you just simply print out invalid day number. So let's try and see how it works. It is printing again Wednesday. So it's much straightforward, and it is more readable as compared to using if conditions. So when we have a lot of conditions to be checked, it's easier to use a switch statement. So as you see here in this course, I'm giving you different tools and I'm teaching you different tools that are used in C++. And based on what you want to do, based on the application of your code, you need to wisely choose these tools. So you can use if conditions until forever and you can use it always, but is it efficient? No, probably there are some cases that you need to write it with boolean flags, you need to write it with switch statement, etc. So these are only toolboxes that I'm offering, and depending on your application, you need to first clearly think about all of these tools and see use how using these tools and when using these tools would be beneficial for you to write a more concise and efficient code. Welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to use a switch statement once more to see its application and to see how it would be easier to work with switch statements in some cases when we have a lot of conditions to check. So here we need to write a code that asks for three things, two numbers and one character. So based on the characters that we're going to choose between addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, the program is going to execute one of these operations on the two numbers that we are going to give it as an input. So we initialize the character and two numbers, then we read and store the character, we read and store the numbers. One thing to mention here is that previously we were reading and storing the numbers one by one, but here we are doing another method. So we mentioned that enter two numbers and we stored them simultaneously. So when I enter the first number, it will be stored in the num1, and then when I enter the second number, it will be automatically stored in num2. Then we have the switch statement here. Our variable is operation. So depending on what operation the user is going to choose in the terminal, we need to do different things. So the if condition, previously, if we wanted to write the if condition, we would have checked if operation equals addition, equals subtraction, multiplication, etc. However, here we are not using that method, so we are writing switch and the variable is operation. So in case that it is addition, we just print out the result saying that result, and then we have the addition here, and then we break. So in case we have the subtraction, we have the colon, next line, result, subtraction, and then the break. So don't forget that the operation is defined as a character, so we need to have these quotations before and after our math operations. And if it's a star, it's multiplication, and if it's division, this is the nice place here to discuss some reviews for the if condition. So if it's division, enter here, and then we have one if condition that is nested in our last case. So, and then we mention if num2 does not equal 0, then num1 divided by num2 just show the result. However, if num2 equals 0, we need to write then an error because no number can be divided by 0 based on math. And then when these two if and else conditions are checked, we simply break, and the default is like the else condition in the if statement. So if neither of these above mentioned operations are entered, we just mention invalid operation. So let's try it out to see how it works. So I would say addition, first number 2 I enter, and then second number I put it and I enter again. So it is storing both numbers and returns us the addition of these two numbers. Let's go through the code once more. So it stores two numbers simultaneously. It enters this switch part. In case that if in case that the user chooses to have the addition, it enters this place and then it gives us the result as shown here. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to practice this switch statement more and more so you get used to it and know when to use it efficiently. Hello everyone, welcome to another coding exercise lesson here. So today we want to write a program that depends on the input. It gives us different messages in the output. So we would like to write a program that prints stop if the input is R, prints get ready to stop if the input is Y, and go if the input is G, and also returns invalid color if neither of the above mentioned cases were given as the input. So to do that, we can simply use if else condition. However, because we have many cases, like 4 cases to discuss, it would be easier and more efficient to write switch condition. So we define a light color character here. We get it from the input. We show the message to the user, enter traffic light color, R for red, Y for yellow, and G for green. And then we store it. Then we have our switch statement, and we're going to check the conditions on light color. Therefore, our variable is light color. And in different cases, we discuss the different cases here. So we say if it equals R, we don't write them down, but when we write case, quotation mark R means if light color equals quotation mark R. Colon, we enter this statement and we say cout stop. And then we need to remember that don't forget to write the break there. And in the case it's Y, get ready to stop, it need to be printed. And in the last case, which is G, you can print go. In the default case, when neither of the above mentioned cases were true, we mention invalid color. So let's try it and see how it works. I would say G. It says go. I would say this time, I would say Y. It says get ready to stop. So let's analyze the code once together. So here it starts here, checks the R, saying that light color, does it equal R? No. Does it equal Y? Yes. So when it's not equal R, it escapes. Then it goes for the case Y, and then it is correct. It's true. Then it enters here, and then when it breaks, everything is exited. So the program stopped right there when you put the break. And in case we write something different, like if I say like D, it says invalid color. So because it checked 3 colors, input colors like R, Y, and G, and neither of them were there. So it went to the default statement saying that invalid color. So you see how it is easy to use switch statement instead of if else statement when we have many conditions to check.